right, let's go straight away to our VIP hotline. Clare Lopez is with me, Center for Security Policy, Vice President for Research and Analysis. Iran has warned the United States forces for 3 times in just the past few days that they need to cease further advances into the Persian Gulf, or else there will be a catastrophe if they do not retreat. With me to give some commentary, some thoughts, and some reporting on that is Clare Lopez. Clare, what's happening in the Persian Gulf right now, and why has Iran changed their language from saying that the United States is not a threat but is now a target? That is tough talk if we're to take it seriously, should we?
Well, good morning, Alex. Yes, this is a serious and escalating situation there in the Middle East. The tensions are ratcheting up over the last couple of days. And really, you have to go back about a year to find the beginning of this sequence, and that is when, of course, President Trump decided to withdraw the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, back in May of 2018. And that set in motion a whole sequence of events that included ratcheting sanctions against Iran that are really hitting its economy hard, and its people hard, too, we must say. But now recently, just within the last couple of weeks, President Trump imposed even more and increasingly tougher sanctions, for example, on metals like iron and steel and copper, and is enforcing secondary sanctions on any who would continue to do business, including oil business with Iran, withdrew certain waivers for Iranian oil customers. All of this just really, really increasing the pressure against that regime, which clearly is feeling the pressure and in response has begun to strike out, to lash out. And so within the past week or so, we saw the revelation of certain threats from the Iranian regime. Apparently, the Israeli intelligence helped us to understand what was going on, and the Iranians were allegedly moving short-range ballistic missiles onto the waters off their shores that would be in the Persian Gulf. In response, the United States has moved even more assets, an aircraft carrier, the USS Abraham Lincoln, an amphibious assault ship, the USS Arlington, Patriot missile batteries, B-52s, bomber squadron, and so it goes back and forth. And an Iranian senior military officer, General Amir Ali Hajizadeh, appeared actually on Iranian TV a couple of days ago with a map behind him, saying what you just, the quote that you just mentioned there, Alex, that the increasing presence of U.S. forces in the region are a target, not a threat. And then, of course, we see the, sabotage attacks against 4 oil tankers near the Persian Gulf. So, yes, I mean, the tensions are ratcheting up. But in the end, these are the actions of a regime in Tehran that is frightened, it is fragile, and it knows that the overwhelming military might of what it's up against in the United States make it unadvisable to continue with the threats.
Sure. So what has changed? Does this all come from the change in policy by President Trump towards Iran, or is there more to it than that? Has anything else changed geopolitically that we need to know about aside from us pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal?
Well, yes, I think also what we have to take a look at is the increasing domestic threat to that fragile regime in Tehran. And we know that since the end of 2017, I mean late December 2017, onwards all the way to the present time, you have nonstop demonstrations, protests, labor strikes inside of Iran, all over Iran, not just the big cities, as was more the case back in 2009, but rather everywhere in the country, including the ethnic minority, sort of geographic perimeter areas of Iran. And so, you know, they've got domestic troubles as well as these external pressures, arising from the sanctions and domestic, the financial stresses. What they're being forced to do, of course, is to make choices between continuing to fund Islamic Jihad terror groups like Hamas and Hezbollah and the Iraqi Shiite terror militias and prop up the genocidal regime of Bashar al-Assad in Damascus, a choice between that and helping its own people who, for example, have suffered terribly in heavy rains and spring floods without much help from the government to come to their aid. So it's a combination of factors that are really providing that pressure on the regime right now.
All right, so there is a report out there that the United States could be deploying over 100,000 troops to Iran. This would be pretty surprising here, and I don't know if have you seen this report? Is it credible in your opinion?
I've not seen it. I'd not heard of it. I think that is not credible. Certainly, the forces that are convening or converging, maybe I should say, in the areas around the Persian Gulf, include air forces. They include missile forces, as we've mentioned, the Patriot missile battery. Marine forces on board various of these vessels. But in addition to that, the United States has, I don't know how many, a couple of dozen military bases in and around the entire region of the Persian Gulf, Middle East, more broadly speaking. There are enough forces there, in addition to the new forces moving towards the area with the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group to take care of any threat that the Iranian regime could possibly pose. But 100,000 troops to Iran, no, that I did not see the report, but that does not sound credible. No.
Okay, yeah, that sounds implausible to me. Perhaps putting out some information to perhaps it is a stalking horse. I don't know what the expression would be in this case, but we know that Iran follows our media very closely, and it could be something like that. But we'll see. Let's talk about this Saudi oil pipeline that was attacked. It looks like it was attacked by drones. Also had a Saudi tanker that was, I guess, sabotaged, though it's pretty mysterious what happened. Oil tanker is sabotaged in the Gulf. Again, 2 Saudi oil tankers. I apologize, not 1, 2. What do we know here? It seems pretty mysterious. Is there anything to take away from it? Anything to be concerned about longer term?
Yeah, well, definitely, I think so. And overall, there were 4 oil tankers subjected to sabotage. Apparently, explosives were attached to their hulls, at near the waterline, causing huge holes in the hulls of these ships. 2 were Saudi. 1 was Norway flagged, and 1 was flagged by the UAE. This happened just outside of the Persian Gulf, just outside of the Strait of Hormuz, off of one of the United Arab Emirates. What this shows is the Iranian desperation, of course, but willingness to use indirect means. They know better, you see, than to go directly up against the might of the United States military converging on the area. And so typically, and I think this is what we really have to look at, are these kinds of other attacks which, in the beginning may be indeterminate. Now the United States has determined that these attacks, they've laid the blame with the Iranians. But I think also we need to look at other proxy forces that Iran often likes to use to deflect, the authorship of attacks as being the Tehran regime itself. For example, about a week ago, we had hundreds of rockets and missiles launched out of Gaza by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad onto civilian Israelis, killing and injuring people. Indirect, again, use of proxy forces. I think we need to look at the northern border of Israel as well, where Hezbollah threatens. And remember, too, that Hezbollah and Iran itself have forces, including the Iranian IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Quds Force, intelligence service, and Hezbollah, all throughout the Western Hemisphere, certainly in South America, base of operations in Venezuela, and Hezbollah, of course, has cells all over the United States that are active in various ways, criminality, pre-attack casing, and surveillance too. So what I'm getting at is the Iranian proclivity to strike back in indirect ways using its terror proxies, and I think we need to be alert for that threat too.
Yeah, I think so. And how does this connect to Mike Pompeo's surprise trip to Brussels, where he discussed Iran with other EU leaders? He also went to Iraq. What happened there, and what do you think this means?
Well, I mean, obviously, he diverted from his original travel itinerary with the rise in tensions in order to, talk with our European allies, who some of them are not signatories because nobody signed it, but they are part of the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal. So obviously he wanted to speak with them. Iraq, of course, unfortunately, Baghdad has become nothing much more than an Iranian satrapy, and unfortunately we still have a large number of troops and other personnel in the area at risk and under direct threat from the Iranian regime. And so I think it's very natural that Secretary Pompeo would have gone to Baghdad to probably issue a warning that Baghdad has a responsibility. I mean, it has come under the subjugation and subordination of the Tehran regime, but nevertheless, it is still a quasi-functioning government and needs to, I'm sure this is what Secretary Pompeo told them, needs to exert, the authority over the territory that it does control, whatever it has left, and has a responsibility towards the safety and security of American personnel in the area.
Clare Lopez again is with me, Center for Security Policy, Vice President for Research and Analysis. And Clare, last topic for today is we've started to track, as we do every year, Ramadan violence. So far, we're 1 week in, 165 dead, 145 wounded worldwide. Mainly the Islamic State carried out 30 attacks in over 10 countries, though it is a variety of Islamic terrorists. Aside from the fact that any somewhat mainstream outlet that covers it, I mean, no one does, aside from Breitbart. But why is it that Ramadan is so violent typically, and just your reaction to these early numbers?
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Breitbart for covering this when so few others do make any effort. But it is often typical, yes, that during the month of Ramadan, we are in Ramadan right now, began about May the 5th, runs around 30 days until about the 5th of June or so. And because of the canonical text, because of the doctrinal Islamic texts that we have from the time of Muhammad himself, we know that Ramadan is a period of special jihad. It is dedicated by Muslims everywhere in the world, not just to the fasting and the prayers. Some do that. But it is also dedicated to the jihad attacks that you're talking about. Why? Because the example of Muhammad from his biography, written by a follower, Ibn Ishaq, lays that down, that Muhammad himself declared that fighting was more important, that jihad was more important than merely letting enemies go free during the month of Ramadan. And so it is that unfortunately the uptick in the attacks all over the world has become evident. The Islamic State, by the way, is not destroyed, and it's why it changed its name from ISIS, Islamic State in Iraq and Al-Sham, to simply Islamic State, because it's all over the place now. It is not any longer just in Iraq and Al-Sham, the Middle East. We've seen attacks in Sri Lanka. We see their presence across North Africa, in the Sinai, and many other places. Also, the horrific attacks against Christians, for example, in Nigeria by Islamic State-affiliated Boko Haram jihadis. their churches destroyed, Christians slaughtered. But this is canonical. This is mainstream, normative. It's not radical. It's not extreme. It is straight up the middle, canonical Islamic doctrine. And unfortunately, Ramadan is a period of heightened jihad attacks every single year. I'll make mention of one last thing. Too many people often follow along with celebrating the end of Ramadan, which will come up in the beginning of June, with the final celebration of the Eid al-Fitr. Well, the Eid al-Fitr mark this for the time when it comes, is nothing more than the celebration of the 624 Battle of Badr that Muhammad fought for the first time and won. Islamic forces beating a non-Muslim force on the field of battle. That's what the Eid al-Fitr celebrates, the defeat of non-Muslim forces on the field of battle by Muslim armies. So keep this in mind. Unfortunately, we have a long ways to go in this Ramadan.
Clare Lopez, thanks a lot for all the insight and information.
Thank you.